FBI files can remain unsolved for decades, while criminals appearing on the most wanted list stay out of reach of law enforcement for an equally long time. But every now and then, new advancements in technology can lead to more solved cold cases, and sometimes all it takes is more awareness or a few years for more witnesses to come forward, and famous cold cases are solved. Number 5. Jesus Robert Mangia had been on the run for 9 years when he was placed on the FBI's most wanted list in 2017. Mangia was wanted for a brutal attack on his estranged wife that resulted in her passing away. He was already a known criminal at the time of the attack, and authorities believed he was extremely dangerous and would do anything to evade capture. In 2018, he was finally caught. The incident took place 10 years earlier. Cheryl Saccheza had been married to Mangia for several years, and they had 4 children together. She eventually ended their relationship, which he clearly wasn't happy about. When he discovered Cheryl was in a romantic relationship with another man, he acted violently and threatened to take her life. On July 1st, 2008, he carried out the threat. Mangia lured Cheryl back to their home in Las Vegas. He then forced her into her car, tying her hands behind her back and her head to the headrest of the back seat. With Cheryl restrained in the back of the car, Mangia drove to a remote location where he could finish the crime. After taking her life, he drove the car with her body still tied up inside back to her home. Cheryl's badly beaten body was discovered by her sister the following day. An arrest warrant was issued the day after the crime, but Mangia fled a few days later to avoid prosecution. Local law enforcement could not locate him. Mangia was known to be a member of the Tepa 13 gang and already had a criminal record, mostly for crimes involving violent robberies. Authorities believed that he had ties to Los Angeles and Bakersfield, California, but there was also a worry he may have fled to Mexico. The FBI got involved in the case. He had a number of distinctive markings on his body, including a missing finger and a number of tattoos. That, along with his violent nature, made him the perfect candidate to be added to the most wanted list when a space became available in 2017. The added publicity and international attention on the FBI's wanted list helped capture the wanted criminal. Working with partners in Mexico, the FBI apprehended Mangia just a few months after he was placed on the list. He was brought back to the United States and was still awaiting trial when he caught COVID-19 in 2021 and passed away. Number 4. The FBI's automated fingerprint identification system has helped close countless cold cases since it became operational in the early 2000s. Many FBI files and other police cold cases have all the pieces needed to place the criminal at the scene of the crime, but aren't able to identify who the criminal actually is. In 2013, the system helped to close a cold case that had been open since 1969. Diane Maxwell Jackson was 25 years old in 1969. She worked as a Southwestern Bell telephone operator in Houston and was a single mother. It was on her way back to work that she was kidnapped on December 14th. She was forced into a shack at an abandoned service station at Jefferson and Austin, where an unknown assailant violently took her life. Her vehicle was then stolen and later found abandoned nearby. An investigation by local police turned up no suspects. There were a handful of witnesses, but they were unable to give any information that helped narrow down who the criminal might be, and the case went cold. The most useful piece of information was a set of prints left on Diane's car. A number of fingerprints and a partial palm print were found on the outside of the car. It wouldn't be enough to prove that the person who left the prints was actually responsible for the crime. Anyone simply passing by the vehicle could have left them, but police believed it would give them a lead. Running the prints through the local databases didn't turn up anything. Diane's brother, who had switched from an aspiring lawyer to joining the Texas Rangers, pushed for the case to be re-examined years later. If he hadn't, the case likely would have never been solved. The prints had been filed into the wrong year, so it took a while to even find them again. Rerunning them through the local databases turned up nothing, but the FBI database was more useful. A number of potential suspects were given to investigators, and eventually it was narrowed down to a man named James Ray Davis. Davis had been living in Texarkana for about a decade when police knocked on his door. He had a criminal history and had been in and out of prison in the 60s and 70s. He'd only been released from prison 9 days before Diane was attacked, and he would return to prison not long after for auto theft. None of the early crimes were similar to the way that Diane had passed away, but that changed in 1976. Davis was apprehended for an attempted abduction of a young woman and was imprisoned until 1992. Since his release, he's been living a quiet life. Police questioned him about his involvement in Diane's attack, and he confessed. He pleaded guilty in court, and in 2003 was sentenced to life in prison. Number 3. In 1978, police in Omaha, Illinois, were dealing with the disturbing crime committed by an individual who apparently wanted to taunt authorities. 61-year-old Carol Bonnet had missed work for 2 days in a row, prompting her friends to request a welfare check from her building manager. When Carol didn't answer the door, he looked through the mail slot to see that she was lying face down on the floor and called for an ambulance. Sadly, it was too late. Carol had passed away after being attacked with a bladed weapon. The crime scene itself was very strange. Her telephone cord had been cut, newspapers were strewn about the floor, and 3 towels sat next to Carol's body. Also nearby was a note from the person responsible. It read, "I'm leaving this crime with only one clue. Find it yourself, pig." It was signed Helt. Police gathered the towels, newspapers, and a number of palm and fingerprints from around the apartment, but couldn't point to anything as the one clue the criminal had intentionally left behind. Carol's car, which had been stolen, was found a few days later, but there were no additional clues. Fingerprints were run through the local database, but it turned up nothing. The case went cold. It was eventually passed on to the Omaha Police Department Cold Case Unit, which re-evaluated the case in 2009. Using technology that wasn't available at the time, the team looked for DNA evidence on the items that had been collected from the crime scene. They also ran the fingerprints through the FBI's identification system and were given a name: Jerry Watson. Watson had served prison time for various burglary charges and had been living close to where Carol's car was found. But with only fingerprints connecting him to the crime, police would need more. Watson was in prison at the time of the investigation. He admitted to being in the area when Carol was attacked, but he said he had nothing to do with her passing. However, 2 crucial clues would prove that to be a lie. While re-examining the evidence collected from Carol's flat, investigators noticed blue ink scribbled onto one of the newspapers. It seemed like something had been scribbled out. Examining it closer, investigators revealed the signature Jerry W. had been scribbled out. Investigators were also able to collect DNA from the old items which matched Watson. Watson was convicted of the crime in 2011 and sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. Every few years, there are new advancements in technology, and one of the latest cold case solving advancements was combined with one of the oldest tools for law enforcement to capture a violent criminal in 2017. Walter Giovanni Gomez was added to the FBI's most wanted list in April of 2017. He had been on the run for almost 6 years at the time. Gomez was a member of the MS-13 gang. The gang itself is multinational, operating throughout North and Central America, but the clique Gomez was a part of operated in Plainfield, New Jersey. In the spring of 2011, one of the gang's potential new recruits, Julio Matute, was suspected of disrespecting the gang. He had allegedly been associating with members of a rival gang, and for that, he could no longer be alive. Gomez and another gang member, Cruz Flores, were sent to his home to take him out. Matute apparently didn't suspect anything was wrong and invited them in. They watched TV, drank, and used illegal substances for a while before Gomez and Flores attacked Matute. When Matute's body was found a week later, police were extremely disturbed by the number of wounds that had been inflicted. It was several weeks later when police came to Gomez's home to question him on the crime. He fled out the window and wouldn't be seen for 6 years. In the meantime, the rest of the Plainfield gang were arrested for racketeering and other crimes, and Flores was convicted for taking Matute's life. But police were no closer to finding Gomez. It was only when he was placed on the FBI's most wanted list that a lead came in. A tipster contacted authorities to say that he recognized the man on Gomez's wanted poster. He directed authorities to a Facebook page that had photos of a man that did resemble Gomez, but when the photos were put into facial recognition software, they matched to a man named Jesus Lopez Centorio, who had been arrested in 2014 for possession of a controlled substance. Still, police believed that this could have been the person they were looking for, as the visible tattoos matched those Gomez was known to have. They also ran facial recognition software on a woman seen in many of the photos with Centorio. She also had a match in the database, which gave investigators an address. The FBI staked out the address and followed the woman. It wasn't long before the man calling himself Centorio showed up, and police were now convinced this was Gomez. In August of 2017, the surveillance team swooped in to arrest Gomez. At first, he claimed his name was Centorio, but then confessed to being the person on Gomez's wanted poster. He was taken back to New Jersey and pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy. Number 1. The passing of Samuel Pettyjohn in 1979 was at the center of an investigation into a corrupt governor and a scheme to buy paroles in Tennessee. It was a scheme that would go unsolved for 42 years. Pettyjohn was not familiar with the crime. Despite being unable to read or write, he had a successful business and was well connected in both politics and crime, which had a habit of mixing at the time. He had owned several nightclubs and had ties to the Teamsters Union. He was personal friends with Jimmy Hoffa. It was those political connections that would eventually claim his life. In 1975, Ray Blanton became state governor. He would soon be embroiled in a scandal in which he pardoned prisoners or got them early parole in return for bribes. Pettyjohn was one of the people who would collect the bribes on Blanton's behalf. The FBI began investigating the case, and Pettyjohn became an informant for them. It was the early hours of February 1st, 1979, when Pettyjohn lost his life. He was at the Beverage Center, a business he owned. He told a number of people to meet him there after the center had closed, as he had business matters to discuss. He also told 2 police officers who had been with him to leave, as he was being watched from across the street. At 1:30 a.m., a man was spotted. He was black, wearing glasses, and sported a beard, and entered the center and fired at Pettyjohn 4 times. He then left the building and fired twice more before making his escape. Pettyjohn was found with a still-burning cigar in his hand. Police made a few arrests based on the witnesses, but both had alibis and they were let go. Despite countless interviews, both for the Blanton investigation and the investigation into Pettyjohn's passing, no significant leads could be made, and the case went cold. That was until 2015, when investigators took another look at the crime. Going back through interviews and conducting new interviews with those who ran in the same circles as Pettyjohn revealed valuable information. Finally, investigators identified a suspect, Ed Alley. Alley was a bank robber who apparently told multiple associates he performed the hit on Pettyjohn. One of these even went to the county district attorney with this information in the 1990s, but it apparently went no further. In July of this year, investigators confirmed they had enough evidence to indict Alley for the crime, but he passed away in federal prison in 2005. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.